Are you a true history detective? Then you've heard the tales of the Lost Colony of Roanoke. But what if I told you we found the missing piece to this impossible puzzle, a detail overlooked for centuries? Join us as we put a radical new theory to the test, and see if you can resist believing we finally cracked the code of Roanoke. What if everything we thought we knew about the Lost Colony of Roanoke was wrong? Today, we're not just rehashing old theories. We're unveiling a radical new perspective that could finally rewrite history. The story is etched into the American psyche, a foundational mystery as old as the nation's European origins. In 1587, 115 English arrived, men, women, children, landing on Roanoke Island, a sliver off modern-day North Carolina. They were led by Governor John White. He sailed back to England for supplies, a journey he expected to be short. Instead, war with Spain trapped him there for 3 long, agonizing years. When he finally returned in 1590, he found nothing. The settlement was gone. The houses were dismantled. The colonists had vanished. The only clue left behind was a single word carved into a wooden post: Croatoan. The silence that greeted John White has echoed through history, a void that storytellers and historians have rushed to fill. The starkness of the scene is its power. There were no signs of a struggle. No bodies were ever found. The neat disassembly of the homes suggested a planned departure, not a panicked flight or a violent massacre. They were instructed to carve a Maltese cross if forced to leave under duress, but no such cross was found. The name Croatoan pointed to Croatoan Island, now known as Hatteras Island, the ancestral home of a friendly Algonquian tribe. Yet, a coming storm prevented White from investigating that lead, forcing his ships back to sea, leaving the fate of his family, including his granddaughter, Virginia Dare, to speculation. This foundational American ghost story has become a canvas for our darkest fears and our most romantic hopes. For centuries, 2 dominant narratives have competed, each offering a tidy, if grim, resolution. The first, peaceful assimilation. Colonists, facing starvation and abandonment, walked to join native allies on Croatoan Island. Croatoan, carving as a signpost. Jamestown accounts from the early 17th century, encounters with Native Americans who had gray eyes, accounts of people claiming English ancestry, a comforting story of survival through cultural merging. But the assimilation theory crumbles under scrutiny. If all 115 colonists integrated with the Croatoan people, we'd expect major impacts on material culture, language, and genetic makeup. Yet definitive, widespread evidence is lacking. The second theory, violent annihilation. Colonists wiped out by a hostile Spanish patrol or by powerful inland tribes like the Eno or the Tuscarora. John Smith recorded Chief Powhatan's claim of an orchestrated attack on settlers living with southern tribes. This explains the lack of survivors and fits brutal colonial realities. It imagines a weak, isolated colony destroyed by a superior force. But evidence at Roanoke contradicts this. John White's account: houses taken down, not burned. No skeletons, no hastily buried bodies, no scattered weapons. The fort's careful deconstruction suggests an orderly departure, not a chaotic slaughter. A massacre at another site remains possible, but the primary settlement doesn't support it. The long-standing failure to solve the Roanoke mystery may stem less from a lack of clues and more from a failure of imagination, a historical blind spot created by our own biases and academic silos. For generations, the search was led by historians focused on written English records or by archaeologists who dug for English artifacts in a single, predetermined location. The investigation was viewed through a distinctly colonial lens. The central question was always, what happened to the English? This perspective relegated the Native American side to the background, treating Algonquian societies as passive rather than active agents. The Croatoan carving was treated as the single message. Few asked if it was part of a more complex plan. Oral traditions of local tribes were often dismissed as unreliable folklore. Looking beyond the islands to the vast inland rivers reveals how much remained unexplored. A new theory is now gaining traction, one that reframes the entire mystery. It does not offer a single, simple answer, but suggests a more nuanced, logical scenario. The split journey hypothesis. The 115 colonists did not move as a single monolithic group. They intentionally split, 2 groups and multiple smaller parties. Croatoan was likely not a colony-wide message. It was a signpost for one contingent, a small group of perhaps 20 to 30 people, likely seeking refuge with Monteo's friendly tribe. The absence of a distress cross suggests this was a planned, safe departure. The first and most compelling piece of evidence comes from a hidden detail on a 400-year-old map. In 2012, researchers discovered, beneath a paper patch, a faint 4-pointed star drawn in red and blue ink, a symbol resembling a fort, about 50 miles inland at the confluence of the Chowan and Roanoke rivers. This X on the map is a bombshell. Its location matches White's note of 50 miles into the main, the planned site for a second permanent settlement. The concealment implies importance, a secret site the English didn't want the Spanish to find. It gives a concrete destination for the larger group who left for the interior, a calculated move to a pre-selected site X. The location offered protected harbor, freshwater, and fertile ground, near friendly Chowanoke territory. A cartographic whisper from the governor, pointing searchers exactly where to look. The discovery shifts the Roanoke investigation inland and narrows the archaeological search. The second line of evidence emerges from the persistent, long-dismissed oral traditions of inland native communities. For centuries, tribes like the Lumbee, the Haliwa-Saponi, and other coastal plain tribes have passed down stories of stranded Europeans taken in and married into their families. These traditions speak of ancestors with light-colored eyes and English-sounding surnames adapted over time. Viewed through the split journey lens, these histories take on new weight and significance. Not vague coastal tales, but specific family histories from the very inland regions where colonists may have resettled. The Lumbee, centered in Robeson County and linked by trade routes, holds strong traditions of mixed heritage. Timing, geography, and distinctly English surnames like Locklear, Oxendine, and Chavis appear early in their records. If 80 or more colonists established a new inland settlement, their survival depended on alliances with powerful neighbors. Over time, through intermarriage and exchange, English identity would fade, but DNA, names, and stories would endure within native societies. What was once dismissed as myth now looks like a crucial living archive, these communities as keepers of the Roanoke legacy. The whispers from the Pamlico, the Roanoke, and the Lumbee rivers tell the other half of the story. A story told not in ink on paper, but in the enduring memory of a people. The third, and perhaps most tangible, piece of evidence comes from archaeology. Near the confluence, a dig led by the First Colony Foundation unearthed something small but profound. It was not a fort and not a trove of English treasure, but scattered fragments of 16th century European pottery. Among them, distinctive German stoneware and borderware, common English kitchenware of the period, also found on Roanoke Island. Finding it again, 50 miles inland, is a direct material link, the archaeological equivalent of a breadcrumb trail. Trade is possible, but tight clustering and the domestic nature suggest English colonists themselves. Not high-status goods, everyday pots and pans a family would carry, hinting at a domestic presence. However small, the discovery is monumental. The first concrete proof some colonists traveled inland to White's marked site. It corroborates White's journal and the hidden fort symbol, a touchstone connecting theory to the soil, a small, perhaps temporary camp, a waypoint toward a settlement they never had the chance to complete. The split journey hypothesis reconciles the most baffling inconsistencies. It explains the Croatoan carving, the lack of bodies, the disassembled fort. The carving pointed to one destination without distress, a friendly place. White assumed everyone went there, and history followed that assumption. No battle, a voluntary, orderly departure. Salvaged nails, timbers, door frames for new shelters. Few European artifacts and oral ancestry on Hatteras match a small group. Inland tales and surnames match the larger group. Assimilation and destruction may both be right, but for different groups. Ultimately, disappearance reframed as calculated survival. We looked for one answer. They created two. Rethinking the fate of the Roanoke colonists through the split journey hypothesis does more than solve a riddle. It reframes the earliest encounters between Europeans and Native Americans, beyond conflict and conquest toward nuance, adaptation, and interdependence. Survival depended on help, guidance, and acceptance from Algonquian and Siouan neighbors. They did not conquer the land. They submitted to its realities and to those who knew it. Not English dominance, but English desperation leading to integration. America's beginnings blur earlier than Jamestown, families of Roanoke surviving within the native world. Their legacy is in DNA and stories, not monuments and cities. This validates modern tribes' oral traditions and mixed heritage claims, and opens new avenues: dispersed site digs, community-partnered genetics, and linguistic re-examination. The mystery of the lost colony of Roanoke may never be solved, not like a crime, with a final report and definitive conclusion. There will likely never be a mass grave or a hidden journal that provides all the answers. The evidence will continue to arrive in fragments: a shard of pottery, a newly translated oral history, a faint mark on a map. The split journey hypothesis offers the most coherent framework yet to assemble a plausible, deeply human story. It replaces a ghostly vanishing with resilience, strategy, and adaptation. The colonists are not just lost, they are relocated, dispersed, absorbed. They became, in a sense, the first English Americans, identity dissolving into the continent's vastness. Croatoan was not an epitaph, but a signpost for one path as most quietly marched inland. History is a living field, reshaped by new evidence and perspectives. It is no longer simply what happened to them, but who did they become? Share your thoughts below. The puzzle is still unfolding,